If your job ever feels like the same thing on repeat, hour after hour, that feeling didn't come out of nowhere. A lot of modern work was built on the idea that people should move like parts in a machine. And one of the biggest reasons work started to feel that way was Henry Ford. He didn't just build cheaper cars. He helped redesign the entire meaning of industrial labor in America. The moving assembly line promised something huge: more cars, lower prices, and better pay down the road. But it also brought monotony, pressure, and a new kind of control over workers' lives. Picture Highland Park, Michigan in 1913. Before Ford's breakthrough, building a car still took crews of men moving around the chassis, using skill, judgment, and muscle. Then Ford's team changed the whole setup. They started pulling the worker, first with a rope, then with a chain. The result was staggering. Model T assembly time dropped from about 12.5 hours to around 93 minutes. Ford didn't invent the logic behind it. Frederick Winslow Taylor had already argued in 1911 that management should fully plan out the work of every laborer. Ford turned that idea into steel, belts, and motion. One worker adds a part, another tightens a bolt, and the same motion repeats again and again. The chassis kept moving whether your body could keep up or not. That was the secret. Divide the job, standardize the parts, and pace the human being to the machine. It was brilliant for productivity, but it was brutal for the soul because it took skilled craft and reduced it to simple, repetitive tasks. That made workers easier to train, easier to replace, and easier to control. And by late 1913, Ford's labor turnover had exploded to about 370%. Men were bored, late, absent, or just gone. A lot of them simply couldn't stand the discipline of the line. So Ford made a move that sounded almost prophetic. On January 5th, 1914, he announced the famous $5 day. A week later, the company replaced the old 9-hour pay structure with $5 for an 8-hour day for male factory workers. Women weren't included in that until 1916. That detail matters. It tells you a lot about who industrial citizenship was really built for. Ford sold the change as a moral crusade. He said he wanted to make 25,000 prosperous and contented, not enrich slave drivers. The country went wild. Thousands of job seekers rushed the plant gates, and the crowd got so chaotic that fire hoses were used to drive people back in the freezing January weather. But the raise came with control. In 1914, Ford created the sociological department, and it made unannounced home visits. They checked cleanliness, looked for drinking, asked about lodgers, asked whether children were in school, and even monitored bank deposits. In other words, the assembly line didn't stop at the factory door. It followed workers into the kitchen, the bedroom, and the dinner table. That's why $5 day was both generous and invasive. It was a raise and a leash at the same time. Still, it worked. Later analysis estimated productivity rose between 40 and 70% after the policy, while costs kept falling. The Model T fell from $825 in 1908 to as little as $260 by 1925. Ford had turned the car into both a mass-produced product and a mass-market product, and that changed the country. Cheap cars helped put the automobile within reach of ordinary Americans. Detroit exploded from 465,766 people in 1910 to 993,678 in 1920 as immigrants and migrants chased industrial wages and a new city life. Many Poles came to Detroit for Ford's $5 jobs. Then World War I slowed immigration, labor shortages grew, and Ford began hiring more African American workers. That helped draw Black Southerners into the city during the Great Migration. But opportunity was never evenly shared, and many Black workers were pushed into the dirtiest and most dangerous jobs. Race shaped the city. Gender did too. The auto workforce was mostly male, and the $5 day was built around the idea of a male breadwinner. A few women worked in places like magneto and coil assembly, winding wire and boxing parts, but they stayed at the margins of the system, not at its center. By the 1920s, Ford pushed the bargain even further with the 5-day, 40-hour week. Edsel Ford said every man needed more than 1 day a week for rest and recreation. That was the real genius of Fordism. It wasn't only about making workers produce more, it was about making them stable enough and paid enough to consume more too. But no machine of control stays untouched forever. The speed-ups, the danger, the monotony, the surveillance, and the anti-union violence all built up a backlash. When union organizers tried to leaflet the River Rouge plant on May 26, 1937, Ford's service department beat them so badly that the photos shocked the nation. Ford didn't recognize the union until May 1941, making him the last major U.S. automaker to do it. By then, the story of the assembly line had already changed American life forever. So what was the assembly line really? It was a liberation machine, a wealth machine, and a labor trap all at once. It raised output, lowered prices, and helped create the modern middle-class consumer. But it also de-skilled labor, concentrated power in management, and taught America a hard lesson. When efficiency becomes the highest value, people start to look like parts. That's Henry Ford's real legacy. Not just the car for the masses, but the system that asked millions of people to move, think, and live at the speed of the line. If this story made you see work differently, follow for more documentary stories like this, and share it with someone who should hear it.